Welcome everyone to Accounting, Profits, and Prosperity. My name is Louis Prosperi, and I'm very, very happy to have Dominique Molina here, the founder and president of the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners. Thank you for joining us, Dominique.
Oh, thanks, Louis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, what really intrigued me about this is you're a chartered CPA and you have a law background, so you have a legal background, which is actually perfect when it comes to taxes because it's the mingling of both, right? Because it's in legal terminology, which I can't stand personally, but it's so having both, I think, is you're in a very unique position. And what I'd like to know is, what's your why? Why did you start the Institute 12 years ago?
Well, I think it actually goes back a little bit further than that, Louis. So without going into too much history there, I started to realize pretty early on. In fact, I think when I got my first paycheck from a fast food restaurant, I realized that they were taking money out and I wanted to know what that was all about. And when I got into schooling and looking at what I wanted to do for a living, I decided I really liked tax and I wanted to experience that. And it wasn't very long before I realized that there's two distinctly different ways that we pay tax. There's those that seem to shoulder and bear the burden of most of the tax liability in this country and those that don't. And I kind of thought in the beginning, maybe it was because they're celebrity or rich and famous or they're privileged in some way. And so I really made it my mission to go out and get educated on how does all this work and why does it seem like our tax system isn't fair? Because what I was noticing early on in my practice is about 93% of business owners are way overpaying their tax. And it's just because they aren't aware of the different strategies that are available. And so that's what really got me started educationally in this field, was understanding that there is so much that can be done to lower tax. And as I started to apply this in my own practice, I quickly built up way more of a demand than I could even handle. And at the same time, I do a lot of networking in the accounting space. And I had accountants approaching me regularly going, well, how do you know that? And how can you teach me? And how do you know that this is possible for your clients? And can I have a copy of this template and this letter that you've written and things like that? And so I started to notice, hey, there's a problem here. We actually have a deficiency in our education system because these are just not part of the minimum education requirements to enter the profession. And as a result, most of us in the profession were not educated in proactive tax reduction strategy. And so that's what led me to creating this program. It's really evolved over the years. And as more people have been contributing to its success and we find out what works and what doesn't work, it's become what it is today. But it really came out of a need of vacuum in the marketplace, if you will, for education.
Well, it's interesting how you came from a perspective is I don't want to pay more tax, so I'm going to learn all about tax and then work on helping people pay less tax. So that's a really cool story. What was interesting too that I noticed in your title, and this is something that popped up in me, is there's tax preparers and tax planners. I thought that was very unique, right? Because in your description and how you put yourself on your certification on your institute, tell people what the difference is between a preparer and what a planner does, because I think those are two different functions completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a comparison, Louis. It's kind of like in medicine where you're probably, if you're a healthy person, thankfully, you are seeing your general practitioner for most of your checkups and the common colds that come up and things like that. But when you develop a serious illness or an injury of some type, you have to then go see a specialist. And the specialist just has a deeper training in a particular area of medicine. And the same is true for tax law. It's just that unfortunately, most people aren't really aware of that. And so this specialty is a different discipline. It's focused on a different area of tax law, and it's using all of those laws to help people qualify for those tax breaks that are already there.
So if we go further on the tax planner side, if someone wants to be change from a tax planner or tax preparer to tax planner, what would they have to do? Like what things would they have to put into place to change from just preparing the taxes, right?
Right.
And changing their mindset to be the planner?
I'm glad you brought up mindset because that's a really big issue. And I would generally drift more towards the education aspect of it because there's a lot of technical knowledge that needs to happen first.
Right.
But at the same time, you really do have to shift your mindset because it is a different perspective. And I like to describe it like this. When we are in a tax compliance mode, and by the way, I still run a tax practice, we've got to record history. We've got to report into the government what took place last year.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, it's like driving a car and looking in the rearview mirror. We're looking at what's already happened. But unfortunately, if you didn't qualify for something, then you can't do anything about it because you can't change history. On the other side, on this discipline with tax planning, you're really looking forward through the windshield. And you can turn your car and you can take detours and you can stop and you can speed up. And there's all kinds of things that are still possible because the year's not over yet. And that really takes a different mindset. It takes a proactive perspective to look and see, maybe if we make some small shifts in how this business is conducting its operations, now something that they haven't qualified for in the past suddenly becomes in the realm of possibility. And so that mindset's a really huge piece. And so even before you undertake your technical education, I think it's really important to have that more consultative approach. And that's for that reason, I think accountants are uniquely qualified to enter this field. And it's because as an accountant, you're in real time working with your clients in a more collaborative way than sometimes we do in the tax industry. We kind of get stuck in this perspective, if you will. And that's a really difficult change, or can be a difficult change to make.
I really like that analysis of tax preparation or preparing taxes is when you look, it's technically a rear view mirror look, right? Because at this point, the historical, you're just preparing the best you can. You always try to minimize, that's true. But if you don't qualify, there's nothing to rejig or re-put back in, right? And the tax planner is in a different perspective. He's with you for next year, right? And I really like that approach. And what's interesting about what you're saying is because the big buzzwords now is advisory services. How do you increase your advisory? How do you add value added services? It's all over the place, right? It's the new buzzwords. So, Dominique, what would a person have to do with regards to their practice to shift from just being the preparer to now saying, okay, what do they have to put in place so that they can now do, other than the education part, which is a standard, to then focusing? How do they do that if they're in the preparation mode?
I think one of the challenges is if you already have a thriving practice, you have to carve out space and time to be able to shift the way that you're working with people. The way we've been classically trained to do taxes is we're very responsive and reactive, meaning a client contacts us, we jump into action and we address their problem, we file the form, we help them with that request. But this is different. This really requires you to have a deeper knowledge of the business that you're working with, and then to be able to spend time in advance developing ideas that you can then bring to that client. And unfortunately, just because of the way the monetizing works in this country with respect to tax preparation, most tax practitioners take on such a high volume of clients that it's very difficult to have that time and space amongst the deadlines and drowning in the paperwork to actually approach someone, to take that time without someone asking, to look at what's possible, and then approach them to say, here's what's possible. Is this something that you're interested in? And that's a tough change to make. Can be a very challenging task. I love working in the tax industry, but a lot of what we commiserate about in this business is, how many clients we have and how none of our days are pre-planned. They're all different. We don't necessarily know what we're going to be working on, or maybe what we've planned to work on, we can't ever get to. And it's because there's just such high volumes of work coming in. And unfortunately, the nature of how that is structured makes it very difficult to shift that work style into a more proactive approach. And so you've got to be very protective of your time. You've got to carve out that space to intentionally put a stop to the freight train of compliance work so that you can take a look and examine what's possible and then approach people with it.
So Dominique, let's give them some financial incentives, right? Because when you're telling them to refocus their time and redo that, because one of the things that you said was a deeper knowledge of the company that they're doing. So that means they really
Yeah.
have to take a different approach than, like you said, look at the history
Right.
and then do it. So what's the rate? What's the return for me as a tax preparer becoming a tax planner? How does that impact my life? Like, does it increase
Yeah.
my wealth? Does it increase my time? And what would if I was primarily doing tax preparation and I shifted
Hmm.
over, how would that impact me profitably? Or
Yeah, I mean, that's the best part about this is because this work, when it's done well, creates massive value. I mentioned about 93% of all businesses are wasting money on taxes they don't need to. It's unnecessary. And on average, even for somebody who's making 150,000 or less in a year, they're wasting about $15,000 a year in taxes. That's
that's
substantial.
a big number.
And yeah, it's a big number and it's meaningful to the business, right? Because imagine what you can do with that extra $15,000. It might help you launch that marketing campaign or make a new hire in your business or bring somebody on a contract basis or part time. And so you can see people grow their businesses exponentially as a result of that reduction in tax. But the great piece about it is number one, it's quantifiable. So I know exactly how much I'm worth to my client. If I'm working with somebody who makes 150,000 or less in a year and I can save them $15,000, that now seems so much more meaningful and valuable in the eyes of that business owner. And they're willing to pay so much more for that service than they ever have been willing to pay for tax prep because nobody really wants tax prep. We're sort of like the dentists in our field, right?
I was thinking
Nobody
the
wants
same
to
thing.
go to the
You took the
dentist.
word right out of my mouth. I was just thinking the same thing. Like that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to go to the dentist. You certainly don't want to pay a fortune to go to the dentist. You don't even like going, but we do because we have to.
Have to.
Same thing with tax prep, right? And
Yeah.
so trying to convince someone, no matter what your background is, there are extremely capable, talented, well-educated, well-experienced tax professionals out there, but that doesn't matter to the taxpayer because they don't want to do it anyway. And so in this respect, what we're able to do is really focus on giving them something that they crave, that they want in a big way. And that allows us to actually get paid thousands of dollars per hour. And not because we're ripping anyone off, because we're really focused on creating that high value. And so a lot of tax pros, I think, shy away from this concept of advisory services simply because they don't have time and they cannot afford to spend time on something that's not going to generate income. And it's very difficult for people to conceive of how can this be profitable for me, let alone this could 10x what you're doing in tax prep fees right now. And that's a really difficult concept for folks to get their minds around because it's just not something that's typical. And it's not something that we're classically trained to do. And so when you can do this and do it well, and yes, you can approach current clients with this. There's a specific model that we've tested and proven over time. And when you get people and do that well, that now allows you to be freed up so that you can afford to go deeper. I think most people want to go deeper with their clients. They want to understand more about what's going on. The truth is we just cannot afford to do it and still make a profit running our tax practice. And so what I love most about tax planning is it gives me the ability to afford to do a much better job, to put in more time, to go deeper, to have better connection with my clients. And that makes me feel really good about what I'm doing at the end of the day.
So the tax planning part is really good. To be quite honest, I like that. I actually like the fact that you indicated the rate of return is significantly higher, and it makes sense. People generally don't tend to pay for more money than what's happened in the past.
Right.
And today is they pay a little more money for when you do something for today, but when you help them mitigate future taxes, like it's mitigating risk, same kind of deal,
Right.
right? And it's
Right.
about their future and they have more stability and they understand more what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, everybody pays more for that, right? I mean, if you could have
Yes.
the lottery numbers for next week's, not last week's lottery, how much would you pay for next week's lottery numbers, right? That makes
A
perfect sense.
lot.
The number goes way up,
Yeah.
right? So
And it's
I love that idea.
guaranteed. Here's what I love about that, Louis, is it's guaranteed, right? If somebody promises me the lottery numbers today, I'm not sure if that's right or not, right?
Correct.
Are they
Correct.
telling me the truth?
Yeah.
But this is guaranteed because we know how the tax system works. Everything's in black and white. It's all cited with court guidance or internal revenue code or regs or whatever. And so that's guaranteed. I know that my clients can get a 5 to 10 times return on their investment with me
Right.
by doing tax planning.
Right.
And that's something I just can't do with tax prep. It's necessary. And I'm not trying to devalue that because I understand what goes into it. But unfortunately, our clients don't.
Right.
They don't get that. And so we have a hard time convincing them otherwise, right? It becomes antagonistic.
Well, your dentist example is perfect. People have to get their teeth cleaned. They have to go there with their
Yeah.
fillings and stuff. So they go begrudgingly, right? But
Right.
so
Right.
I love that. Now, how do someone change their model from just give us, if you can, give us an example. How do you go from
Mhm.
waiting for information to do the tax preparation, and then you go from that perspective to asking for stuff, or like how do you, because that's what you're going to have to do as a planner, is you're going to
Right.
flip it so that you meet them for next year, not last year. What are
Right.
some
And
ways to
that's a
kind of put
key
that in play?
that is a key thing that you need. If I don't have the information, then I flat out cannot plan. And I think that's what's confusing for tax pros is that we often have experienced that receiving information too late. You know, they tell us during tax season that, oh yeah, by the way, last year I bought a rental property or I sold a rental property
Right.
or I did this or I did that. And so again, that's very confusing to then think of, well, how can I already know this about my clients. I know they don't contact me. So we have to force them to work in this way. Now, initially, you can bait them into working in this way and you bait them with the potential savings that's there. And if they're an existing client, you have everything you need right now to construct a really decent estimate so that then you can motivate and persuade them into giving you the rest of the info you need.
Okay.
Now, if it's a new person, if it's a prospect coming in, what you're going to do then is change your work style a little bit. And instead of just responding by doing the tax return, which is generally what they're going to ask you to do, you look and examine to come up with your estimate first. You present the options that are there before you take any steps about moving forward with any engagements. And then once you've got them excited and agreeing to move forward and they've paid you for that work, now you put them on a method so that you are meeting with them regularly. You pre-schedule those meetings so that you get the information you need. And in this respect, I think accountants are extremely vital to this process because accountants are on the front line and accountants are seeing what's happening in real time. They can help with the communication. They can help with the implementation and even in recognizing what possibilities are there. And so I think it's really important for accountants to consider being educated to the appropriate level in tax reduction as well, because again, it makes them more valuable to their clients as well.
So Dominique, you actually said something. So what you're telling people, professional accountants or tax planners that want to become tax planners, they have to meet their clients on a regular basis. Is that what you're really saying?
Yes.
Okay, so because
Yeah.
we know that based on the volume, we try to minimize the amount of times we meet with our customers. For you to get this kind of return and this kind of value back, you have
Yes.
to actually flip the script. And
Yes.
is that what you're saying? You're literally saying, okay, tax planner customer,
Mhm.
you want a tax plan, now we got to meet A, B, C, three, and we have to do this
Yes.
during the, so if that's the biggest change that they have to do, if they want to, is that
Absolutely.
correct?
And that's inconceivable to most tax professionals because
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody watching this right now has been on the receiving end of somebody complaining about an invoice.
Yeah.
And so you're setting yourself up already to say, but if I make them meet with me, they don't want to because then they're going to get a bill and I can't afford to meet with them for free.
Right.
Well, here's the structure behind it. And it involves a process and following a proven model. Okay. And that model is that you, number one, automatically up the minimum price that everyone's going to pay for your work because you have to be able to afford to do this. That's the bottom line. If you can't afford to do this, it's not sustainable. Okay.
Right.
But I promise you, if you can make this change, it will change your life and change your business. And so what you do is you up that value from, maybe you're charging $1,000 or $1,500 for a tax return. Now you automatically jump that up to $15,000 or $20,000 for the year. And once you do that, now that payment allows you to afford the time to sit down with somebody. And why do they pay it? Because they're going to get a 5 to 10 times return on that investment. So they're seeking something that you're offering. They may not know it now, but you can certainly bring it to their attention and let them know what's possible. And then they gladly pay it. And that higher level of pay allows you to afford to take that time because that's what we're getting paid to do. And I think it's a scary proposition, this notion of advisory services. And it's scary for a number of reasons because we're in that mindset, as you said, Louis, of meeting as quickly as possible. What's the minimum contact I can have with somebody?
Right.
Because that's what determines my profitability. Right? That's not necessarily what's best for the client, but we're doing the best that we can. So in all fairness to us, that's just kind of how the industry works, right? In this model, it's different. When we are taking a value approach and we're saying, how much value can I possibly create for somebody? And the more value I create for that person, the more I can get paid.
Right.
Well, now that changes the whole thing around. Right. And so if I'm getting paid on the value that I'm creating, then it behooves me to create as much value as possible. And that means getting a deeper knowledge, meeting more, having the information I need so that I can do my job as best as I can.
So that's interesting because one of the things that you said earlier was quantifiable. I think in a lot of advisory services, that's not the case because it's a lot of soft. When you
Right.
transform a company or a business or a person, there's a lot of soft stuff that you can't really quantify.
Yes.
But what you're
Yes.
saying to us when it comes to the tax side, that's kind of a little different because you can actually
Yes.
show them in dollars and cents with this planning that this is what they're going to do. So is that true? Am I correct on
Yeah.
that? That's
Yes.
okay. So
Yes, absolutely. And it kind of works like this. If I know that they are in an entity that disallows them the ability to take some deductions, for example,
right.
and I identify that, hey, if we just change the entity they're in, now they can write off X amount of dollars. Well, there's a formula. I can take the amount of the deductions, multiply it by their effective tax rate, and now I know exactly what that one idea is worth to them in dollars and cents, real numbers. And again, it's, as to your point, it's really difficult to do that with other advisory services
Yes.
that are just as meaningful, but are more difficult to quantify. And so here's the beautiful thing is that when you package this, in other words, I'm sure everybody watching has given some advice to a client that's resulted in more profit in their business, less cost, you name it. But it's difficult to attribute that to ourselves, to what we do. If I combine that service with my tax planning where I can quantify it, now suddenly everything I do for them has just been stepped up and labeled exactly what I'm worth to them. And so it's huge for all of the work that we do, not only the planning, but advisory services where we're consulting, CFO work, even the value of having good records and up-to-date information becomes more valuable because that is a big piece of the puzzle that's necessary. Same thing with compliance. Now all of a sudden, that is worth more because it's part of this bigger package that I'm offering.
By the way, I agree with everything you said. I thought that was brilliant, and I do agree with what you're talking about with the quantifiable thing. I think tax planners are probably in the best when it comes to advisory services to actually show real numbers, like you do A, B, C,
Right.
D, this is what you save, or this is what you reduce, or whatever. So it's actually quantifiable. The thing that what's interesting for me is where we tend to fall down is because you went from 1,000 to 15,000, which
Right.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of people that would charge $1,000 for a return now have to charge them 15. They're going to go, well, I can't do that. That's out of the picture,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, but the difference is when you actually ask price the product during
Yes.
tax planning.
Yes.
Do you do all the tax planning, all the preparation first, and then you go, here's the plan and here's the price, or do you like where do you go? Because
Yeah.
that helps a lot in determining the next step.
You're right. That is a key component because if I do all this work and then I present it to them, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? Where we're out because we present it and they go, no, I don't really think it's worth that much, or I didn't ask for that, I
Yeah,
didn't want that, or I don't want that. So you have to be able to do just enough work to come up with a good estimate of what's possible. Now, you won't know the exact answers. That's what you're asking them to hire you to figure out. But we can have general ideas. And again, I think it is difficult if you've never done this before because you don't necessarily know all of those strategies. So that's the education component, is understanding where do these things apply? How do you recognize what's possible for somebody? But that's solvable, right? You just get training, just like you probably never knew accounting before you got trained in how to do accounting, right? We all start out at the same knowledge level, and you can improve that over time. But you do have to get their agreement, and I say payment up front before you start any of that work. And it's totally possible. I've done it on $2,500 plans, $20,000 plans, $200,000 plans, $2 million plans.
okay.
They say yes, they pay in advance, then we get to work and we do what's necessary.
Well, that's great. I really liked that concept of getting paid up front, and that's probably one of the how when we originally started the conversation, we talked about mindset. So I think the key focus here is not only do you look in the future, but you should be paid prior to doing the work, or at least set up a payment plan or some sort of system that automatically takes care of the
Yes.
payment, right? I mean
Yeah.
that's really good. So I
Yeah.
tell us a little
When you
bit.
look at the
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you look at the billable hour model,
Yeah.
this idea that we do the work first and then we get paid, we have everything on the line. We have everything to lose because if that person refuses to pay or they try to negotiate that price afterwards or they give you a bad check, we've just lost our inventory. And on that same note, we also tend to give away a lot of our inventory. We want to be helpful. We want to give tips or ways for people to do better, to make more money in their business, to save on taxes, to save on other expenses.
True.
And we often just offer that without first offering the engagement to get there. We just do it. And some of that's in the nature of the work. Again, we're reactive. We just get it done. We're in a hurry. We're trying to manage a busy workload. We want to please. So we do it. But here's the interesting change that comes about is that when you suddenly put an appropriate price tag on that wisdom, on that expertise that you have, now it's more meaningful and valuable in the eyes of the client. And it's really interesting because in making this transformation in my own practice, I was surprised. There were people who were the biggest complainers about my invoices,
Right, right.
who, when I made this offer, suddenly were late to appointments, suddenly turned and got information in immediately, suddenly referred me to other people because they were more proud of the work that I was doing before they saw me as a paper pusher. And so it is sort of up to us to change that impression, and we can. It's totally possible, but you do have to change that mindset and change that work style ahead of time.
Training your customers is an interesting concept. I think it's funny. I mean, if you don't, training's probably not a good one because it's more like for pets and stuff, but I mean, setting up proper expectations, maybe changing the expectation model for the customer has a long way in you helping to transfer. I think that's great. You know, we've talked a lot about this. What are you doing, Dominique, with regards to helping people switch over from being the, and by the way, we both know that tax preparation is very profitable on its own. Like, people can make
Right.
money looking in the rear
Right.
mirror. It's
Yep.
not like you're not making money there, but
Nope.
but tell me what you're doing right now that can help them flip over. Are there things that you're working on or that's out there that can help?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of education programs for business owners who are looking to do it themselves and try to do this. We've got training programs for accountants and bookkeepers who want to be more valuable to their clients, make more money. And we've got training programs for those that are licensed and are looking to pursue a more advanced education in tax reduction. So our latest project that I'm most excited about right now is called DTax University. It is a 12-month program. It's just an hour a month. And the guarantee there is that you reduce taxes by $15,000 or more per year. And it's a great training program. It can be used by accountants to help them charge more, get paid more, be seen as more valuable in the eyes of their clients, and how to actually work more collaboratively with the tax advisor so that the client ultimately wins. They're getting the maximum savings that they're legally allowed.
Well, this was great. Dominique, I want to thank you for spending time with us. I think this was extremely informative because your institute is all about planning and planners, and it just takes the preparer to the next level. And as always, we always have to look at the next level. And I think the mindset that you talked about was fantastic. I want to thank you very much. If someone wants to get a hold of you or wants more information, where should they go?
Just go to dtaxu.com. So DETAXU, the letter U.com. And I've got some training and other resources that are free. There's books and information about courses that are available, but you can reach me through that website.
Fantastic. And thank you very much. Dominique, thank you again. And thank you all of you for watching the show. If you like this episode, please subscribe. And until next time, stay hydrated and be well. Bye for now.